The metal drawer groaned as it slid shut, swallowing the silence of the morgue. Fluorescence hummed, cold air pressed against a body wrapped in linen, a toe tag whispering on still skin. A zipper's teeth paused, then sealed. Somewhere, a faint echo, too soft to trust, brushed the technician's ear. He blinked, frowned, and stepped away, uneasy. Paperwork waited. Time of death, signatures, codes. Everything appeared textbook. Pupils fixed, no pulse found, no breath recorded. The checklist felt like armor against doubt. Yet a thin fog curled from the cooling unit, and with it a tiny sound, almost like fabric shifting. He told himself metal settles. He told himself certainty is kindness. In the hallway, a cart rattled. The lights flickered. He returned to the drawer, fingertips stopping inches from the handle. Training cautioned against touching what protocol had closed, but another whisper of movement, linen kissing stainless steel, tugged his attention. He leaned close, hearing only his own breath. Then, a soft thump as if from inside. The technician's pulse spiked. "False positives happen," he recited. "Instruments miss, hands misread. In a room built for endings, doubt is an unwelcome guest." He slid the drawer out a fraction. The linen rose, barely, like a tide that forgot to stay gone. Eyes squeezed shut beneath the sheet. He hesitated, afraid of both outcomes. The sheet lifted. A mouth opened, dragging a ragged breath from frozen air. The tag swung wildly, clacking against metal. The technician stumbled backward, vision tunneling as the impossible collected itself. Lungs learning thunder again. How does a clinically dead patient breathe in a morgue? What happened before this moment would upend everything they believed? Hospitals are designed to catch the slightest flicker of life. Yet even in bright corridors, shadows can hide in plain sight. Tonight's case began with a collapse at home. Frantic CPR and a race against time. Monitors flattened, pupils fixed, a doctor pronounced. The room quieted, but the story did not end where the paperwork started. Our protagonist, let's call him Daniel, was ordinary in the ways that matter. A steady job, a sister who called every Sunday, a dog that waited by the door. When the ambulance doors shut, his world shrank to IV lines and clipped commands. By nightfall, certainty replaced hope. Decisions followed. The morgue received a body they were told was beyond return. Misdiagnosis of clinical death is rare, but not mythical. Detecting life at its faintest requires relentless method. Pulse checks at central arteries, careful auscultation, confirmation over minutes, sometimes repeated. Yet cold rooms and colder assumptions can conspire. In our case, a series of readings pointed one way until a breath in steel silence pointed another. Here's a real medical curiosity connected to survival after apparent death. The Lazarus phenomenon, auto-resuscitation after CPR stops. It can occur minutes after efforts end, likely due to delayed venous return or air trapping releasing. It's uncommon, unsettling, and easily overlooked without prolonged observation. Cases like these remind us that endings can hesitate before they arrive. Before we dive deeper into this shocking case, make sure to subscribe, hit like and comment what city and country you're watching from, so you never miss the next shocking story. Because the moment Daniel's chest stirred in that drawer wasn't the first strange sign. There were earlier clues scattered like breadcrumb pulses, waiting to be read. Daniel's day began unremarkably. He had walked his dog, sipped coffee too hot, and prepared for another shift at the factory. But around mid-morning, a dull ache spread across his chest, heavy as stone. He brushed it off, convinced it was indigestion. Minutes later, dizziness swept over him like a tide. His hands trembled. His dog barked anxiously, pacing near his legs, sensing the shift before Daniel fully realized it. He collapsed near the doorway, gasping. Neighbors rushed in when the barking grew frantic, finding him sprawled, lips pale, eyes wide. Someone dialed emergency services. Another began compressions. "Come on, stay with us," a voice pleaded. The rhythm of life pressed down on his chest, ribs creaking under effort. Sirens wailed closer, the neighborhood holding its breath. Then the monitors in the ambulance delivered numbers everyone feared. Flat lines, whispering endings. In the emergency bay, the team swarmed. "Epinephrine, 1 milligram," a nurse shouted. Defibrillator pads adhered. Shocking arcs of electricity jolted his body. The smell of singed hair filled the sterile air. For a moment, the line quivered on the monitor, then sank flat again. The code team rotated, sweat dripping, muscles straining to keep time against the inevitable. Hope thinned, yet faint warmth clung stubbornly to his skin. Doctors know false signs well. Sometimes chest wall movement tricks the eyes, or electrical artifacts mimic rhythm. But as minutes passed, Daniel's pupils dilated. His carotid felt like glass. "Time of death 1437, the attending pronounced, voice edged with exhaustion. The room froze, then shifted into the quiet choreography of endings. Tubes were removed, machines silenced. Grief pooled heavy in the sterile air, swallowing the urgency that had filled it. His sister, Anna, was brought in. She clutched his hand, still warm, whispering fragments of prayers and apologies. "He was strong," she murmured to the nurse, as if strength could rewrite medical charts. Staff offered tissues, practiced words of condolence. Behind them, paperwork began to fill. Cardiac arrest, non-responsive, no return of spontaneous circulation. On the page, the story ended neatly. In the heart of his sister, nothing felt finished. In rare circumstances, the absence of a detectable pulse can mislead. Certain arrhythmias mimic a systole, and peripheral pulses fade before central ones. Resuscitation protocols demand repeated checks, but under pressure, confirmation can falter. In Daniel's case, minutes of silence convinced the team they had done all they could. Yet beneath the stillness, microcurrents may have stirred, hidden from touch and monitor alike. Unseen sparks can linger, waiting. The body was prepared. A toe tag looped around, sterile and indifferent. Linen sheets enfolded him, the fabric whispering against his skin. Attendants wheeled the gurney down a side corridor, past rooms still alive with cries and alarms. The morgue's door groaned open, swallowing him into refrigerated silence. For staff, it was routine. For Daniel, suspended in twilight between life and death, the journey had only just begun. Hours later, the technician filing forms couldn't shake a feeling. Something about the weight of the body, the faintest condensation on glass. Details too small to matter, too strange to voice. He chalked it up to nerves. After all, death is supposed to be absolute, but medicine sometimes makes mistakes. And this morgue would soon echo with the cost of one. The doctors thought certainty was safe. They were wrong. Inside the morgue, silence pressed down like a second layer of ice. Daniel's body rested on a steel tray, linen wrapped tightly, the tags swaying gently. Technicians came and went, but no one lingered long. The chills seeped too deeply into the bones. Hours stretched thin. What no one noticed was the faintest twitch beneath the sheet. So small, it could be mistaken for settling fabric. The story refused to end. Oxygen deprivation leaves a cruel legacy. Brain cells begin to die within minutes of cardiac arrest, cascading damage outward like cracks in glass. By the time patients reach the morgue, the assumption is irreversible loss. Yet Daniel's neurons whispered in rebellion, clinging to microscopic reserves. His cells, starved but stubborn, refused to let go. Science calls this a low-flow state, when circulation lingers unseen. It is rare, but not impossible. His sister Anna, waiting above in the hospital chapel, couldn't shake a strange conviction. She swore she had felt warmth when she kissed his forehead goodbye. "He isn't gone," she whispered into folded hands, ignoring the glances of others praying nearby. Grief can twist perception, but sometimes intuition brushes against reality. Downstairs, Daniel's chest quivered once, then stilled again, like a tide that almost dared to rise. Technicians filled out paperwork, personal effects catalogued, storage logged. One reached for the drawer to finalize the seal, then a faint rasp, like air slipping through a cracked valve, tickled his ear. He froze, heart hammering. His training screamed protocol, bodies don't breathe. Still, he leaned closer. Another sound, deeper this time, like lungs straining through centuries of silence. He staggered back, sweat prickling cold despite the freezing air. The complication was medical, not mystical. In some cases, residual air trapped in the lungs can shift post-mortem, producing noises that mimic breathing. Doctors warned staff not to confuse these with true signs of life. But this was different. Rhythmic, labored, too persistent to dismiss. Each rasp grew stronger, the linen rising almost imperceptibly. A morgue drawer had become an unintended ventilator, amplifying every fragile return of breath. Panic warred with reason. "Impossible," the technician muttered, pressing a stethoscope against linen. At first, silence, then faint but undeniable. Lub-dub, a sluggish heartbeat refusing extinction. His palms trembled. Reporting a false alarm could mean ridicule or worse. Yet ignoring it could mean sealing a living man inside a coffin of steel. He wiped sweat from his brow, fighting the dread crawling up his spine. The decision hung heavy. Meanwhile, Anna's phone rang. "We'll prepare paperwork for release tomorrow," the hospital administrator explained gently. She nodded, tears blurring the world. But a chill skated her skin, like invisible fingers. Something inside urged her back to the morgue, though she couldn't explain why. As she stood, the chapel's candlelight flickered wildly. Superstition, perhaps, or a faint echo of the impossible truth unfolding beneath her brother's sheet. The technician's hand hovered over the intercom. His training warned against hysteria, but his instincts screamed louder. He drew the drawer open, just enough to let light spill across Daniel's face. Lips cracked, nostrils flared, eyes fluttered beneath pale lids. For a second, silence reclaimed him. Then, with a ragged cough, Daniel's body lurched. The morgue filled with the horrifying sound of the dead refusing to stay dead. "This can't be happening," the technician whispered, stumbling back, nearly dropping the clipboard. He should have called for help, should have triggered protocol. Instead, he froze, trapped between disbelief and terror. Each second stretched like an eternity. Daniel's chest rose again, this time unmistakable. The line between life and death was collapsing, and no one upstairs yet knew. The nightmare was only beginning. The technician finally slammed the intercom button. "Code blue, morgue!" His voice cracked, echoing through sterile halls. At first, silence, then the pounding of hurried steps. The doors burst open, doctors and nurses spilling into the room with wide eyes. "You can't be serious," one muttered, staring at the moving chest of a man whose chart already bore the words "deceased." A monitor was rushed in, leads pressed against clammy skin, sticky against the linen. The screen pulsed irregularly, weak QRS complexes flickering like embers, barely there but real. "Idioventricular rhythm," a resident whispered, stunned. Another voice snapped, "But his time of death was recorded hours ago." A heartbeat that defied paperwork now demanded intervention. The morgue had become an ICU without warning. They cut away the linen, revealing pale flesh mottled with cold. The attending leaned close with a stethoscope, face draining of color. "He's bradycardic but perfusing," she announced. Gasps circled the room. A nurse began warming blankets. Another prepped IV lines. It was surreal. Resuscitation not in the ER, but amid refrigeration units and toe tags. The impossible scene pulled medicine back to its roots. Listen, check, never assume. Science offered explanations, however rare. Cases exist of delayed auto-resuscitation, the Lazarus phenomenon, where circulation resumes spontaneously after failed CPR. Carbon dioxide builds, venous return improves. Trapped air finally escapes. Minutes later, blood surges faintly back. But hours? Almost unheard of. "Document everything," the attending ordered, her pen shaking. Medicine loves certainty. This moment shredded it to pieces. Daniel's eyelids fluttered, his chest strained for another gasp. The team worked frantically, warmed IV fluids, oxygen mask, cardiac drugs titrated drop by drop. His skin blushed faintly, warmth returning like sunrise after endless night. Yet doubt laced every movement. Is this sustainable, or just biology's cruel trick? Someone whispered. The line between miracle and error blurred under fluorescent morgue lights. Anna burst into the room, face pale as she pushed past orderlies. Her knees buckled at the sight, her brother, alive in a place reserved for the dead. Daniel? Her voice cracked like broken glass, his lips parted. No words came, only a rasp, but his gaze shifted toward her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as staff held her back. It was both blessing and torment, yet shadows hung over the revival. Prolonged oxygen deprivation risks brain damage, multi-organ failure, even if circulation returns. A single miracle breath does not guarantee survival. Monitors still quivered dangerously, rhythms unstable. Doctors exchanged glances heavy with unspoken dread. Saving him now meant walking a razor's edge between life and irreversible decline. The fight had only shifted arenas. The attending placed a hand on Anna's shoulder. He's alive, but fragile. We don't know what comes next. The words hung heavy, both gift and warning. In that morgue, they had uncovered not just a living man, but a medical mystery. The clues, warmth, delayed rhythm, a whispered breath, suddenly aligned. And with them came a terrifying question. Could medicine truly explain why Daniel returned? They wheeled him out, past cold drawers that had nearly become his tomb. Nurses whispered, orderlies crossed themselves. The hallway stretched ahead, brighter than the morgue's cruel light. But behind them lingered the chilling thought. If one patient could come back hours after death, how many others had been buried with life still flickering unseen? Daniel's body was transferred from the morgue to the ICU under a cloud of disbelief. The gurney wheels squeaked along the corridor, every passerby pausing at the sight of a patient marked deceased, still breathing. In the elevator, silence reigned except for the steady hiss of oxygen. Doctors avoided each other's eyes. How do you explain the unexplainable to colleagues trained to trust charts and monitors? In the ICU, the team swarmed once more. Warm blankets cocooned him, IV fluids dripped, ventilatory support kicked in. His heartbeat, though fragile, found rhythm under constant watch. We need to decide, aggressive intervention or comfort care, the attending asked. The room stiffened. Too much time had passed without oxygen, raising fears of irreversible brain damage. Reviving him might mean condemning him to a half-life of suffering. Anna's voice cut through clinical debate. Do everything. He's here for a reason. Tears streaked her face, but her tone was iron. Doctors shifted uncomfortably, family conviction clashing with medical caution. Yet her plea weighed heavy. This was not just protocol. It was a human story unfolding in real time, one that refused to fit into neat medical categories. The team convened. Neurological exams revealed faint reflexes, pupils sluggish but reactive, slight withdrawal at painful stimuli. Not brain dead, a resident confirmed. Relief cracked through tension, but fear lingered. Even minimal response meant a fighting chance. The decision crystallized. Pursue full treatment. It was a gamble between extraordinary survival and catastrophic decline. Every hand in the room trembled as consent forms were signed. Cooling protocols, paradoxical in their chill, were initiated to preserve brain function. Machines hummed, tubes connected, alarms chirped in delicate balance. Daniel's chest rose and fell in mechanical rhythm, each breath borrowed from technology. Nurses whispered that he looked peaceful, but peace felt like a fragile disguise. Beneath it pulsed the question no one dared to voice. How much of Daniel truly remained? In conferences later that night, experts debated. Was this Lazarus syndrome delayed beyond precedent? One asked. Another countered, could it be a diagnostic error masked by artifact? Yet none could explain the hours between morgue silence and return of breath. Medical journals documented rare minutes, never stretches like these. Their words circled but never landed, truth slipping through clinical definitions. As the hours ticked by, subtle improvements appeared. Oxygenation stabilized, cardiac rhythms smoothed. He twitched once, an arm shifting against restraints. A murmur rippled through the staff. Anna clasped his hand, whispering, "You're still with me." Machines confirmed what her intuition had always screamed. Life clung stubbornly, inch by inch. Science documented data. Love held vigil. Yet the battle was far from over. The longer he lived, the greater the risk of organ failure or devastating neurological deficits. Doctors weighed interventions with surgical precision, adjusting medications, pacing fluids, recalibrating machines. Each adjustment was both lifeline and gamble. Medicine could revive the body, but could it safeguard the mind? That was the critical decision lurking beneath every action. By dawn, Daniel's vitals whispered fragile stability. Staff slumped in exhausted relief, but no one celebrated. His survival was real, but fragile, a candle flickering against wind. The attending stared at the monitor, voice low. "This is beyond protocol, beyond textbooks. We're standing in uncharted territory." The doctors thought their choices had clear boundaries. They were about to learn those boundaries could bend and break. Days turned into weeks. Daniel's body, once zipped in a morgue bag, now rested in a hospital bed surrounded by beeping monitors. The ICU team rotated shifts, documenting each tiny milestone. First, stable oxygen saturation. Then spontaneous breaths without full ventilator support. Every flicker of progress felt like a triumph. Yet behind every sigh of relief lingered the shadow of what if? What if he never fully returned? Anna refused to leave his side. She read aloud from old journals, played recordings of their childhood songs, even placed his dog's blanket near the bed. Doctors quietly admitted that stimulation mattered. Neural pathways, fragile but not destroyed, might awaken through memory and emotion. One morning, his fingers twitched at the sound of her voice. A nurse gasped, whispering, "He heard her." Gradually, consciousness surfaced like a diver breaking through deep water. His eyes opened, cloudy at first, then focusing with effort. "Daniel," Anna whispered, gripping his hand. He blinked, lips parting in a broken murmur. "Cold, dark." The room stilled. His words, fragile as breath, confirmed what medical charts could not. He had been aware, trapped between silence and survival. Rehabilitation began, grueling and uncertain. Muscles atrophied from immobility screamed with each stretch. Speech therapy worked to restore words lost in hypoxia's fog. Daniel sometimes wept with frustration, sometimes laughed unexpectedly, the emotions of someone who had brushed eternity. "It's like being born again," he admitted, voice hoarse. Each step in recovery was both painful and miraculous. Doctors documented every phase meticulously. The case was submitted to medical boards, sparking debate worldwide. Was this proof of an extreme Lazarus phenomenon, or a catastrophic diagnostic error nearly turned fatal? Journals buzzed, conferences dissected details. But beyond the science stood a man who should not be alive, smiling weakly at his sister, grateful for another sunrise. Daniel's ordeal reshaped hospital protocols. Longer observation periods were instituted before declaring death. New training emphasized patience, second checks, and humility before medicine's mysteries. "This case changed us," admitted the attending, voice heavy with awe. For every staff member present, the morgue was no longer just a place of endings. It was a reminder of medicine's fallibility and humanity's resilience. Anna's faith, mocked at first as denial, was vindicated in the most shocking way. She told friends, "I just knew," her conviction now echoing as testimony of love's intuition. For Daniel, every breath carried new meaning. He took nothing for granted, savoring moments once dismissed as routine. Morning coffee, laughter with neighbors, the dog's eager pause at the door. Survival gave his life sharper edges of gratitude, and yet, questions remained unanswered. What truly saved him? Science, fate, or something neither could explain? Some called it a miracle, others a medical anomaly. Daniel himself, when pressed, simply said, "I wasn't ready." The morgue had almost kept him, but life had pulled harder. The doctors thought they had closed his story. Instead, it became one of the most shocking chapters in medical history. Daniel's survival challenged everything medicine believed it could measure. A man pronounced dead, sealed in a morgue drawer, now walked hospital corridors with the scars of both science and silence. His case forced doctors to confront their own fallibility, proving that even in a world of protocols and machines, the line between death and life is far thinner and more fragile than anyone dares to admit. Beyond the medical journals and debates, the lesson was deeply human. Life can flicker, fade, and return in ways that defy expectation. For Daniel, every breath became a reminder that existence itself is a gift, fragile yet astonishing. For Anna, the ordeal reaffirmed the power of love and intuition, the refusal to surrender even when logic demanded it. Stories like theirs remind us that survival is not only biology, it is will, connection, and mystery intertwined. And now I leave you with a question. What do you think really saved this patient's life? Science or fate? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Because in our next story, you'll meet a patient whose laughter nearly became deadly, a case that proves joy itself can sometimes hide the most shocking danger.